Hello and welcome to episode 242 of the How to Survive podcast. My name is Chris and joining me, as ever, is Joe Sherville. We're stuck, Joe, in a trap. It feels like we can't get out. And the only way of escape is to talk for about 40 minutes about a bad film.
Yeah. I thought you were going down Suspicious Minds then. I'm caught in a trap. I'm gonna get out because I have to watch these shit films.
Yeah. It could only be the work of the nefarious How to Survive podcast.
Yeah.
This week's film, if you didn't get it from either the title of the podcast or from that half-baked spiel, is Spiral from the Book of Saw by Darren Lynn Bousman from the year of our Lord 2021.
Where have we seen Darren before, Chris?
Well, Joe, he directed a number of other Saw films.
Did he?
He did. Saw's, I want to say 3 and 4 at least, or something like that.
Yeah, that's good because it.
And Jigsaw, Jigsaw was like a.
It reeks of new blood and new energy.
Yes, it's clear, I think, that he'd been waiting 15 years to get this. He was just desperate to tell this story, this original, tightly crafted story in Spiral from the Book of Saw.
I feel like all the other Saws he directed were kind of like a studio ransom so that he could get to make the film he really wanted to make.
Yes, and that film is Spiral from the Book of Saw.
What book is that? Is it available to buy?
Yeah.
Is it John Kramer's book?
Yeah, well, presumably John Kramer left some sort of guide to engineering like nefarious traps.
Yeah.
Because characters in this film have certainly carried on his legacy with basically no reason whatsoever or explanation.
Yeah. I mean, his name is mentioned twice.
Mm-hmm.
That is probably as much of a crossover as there is.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the traps, which are... we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We are getting ahead of ourselves because the most important thing to remember, Joe, is that you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/HowToSurvivePod. And at the time of recording and until further notice, all proceeds from the Patreon will be going to the WHO Jigsaw Response Fund, which is, of course, responding to anyone who's been caught who's caught COVID-19 while participating in any of John Kramer's traps.
Yeah.
A mere £1 a month will get you access to all of our back catalogue of bonus episodes and mailbag episodes where we were kind of agony aunts for people. But that was a long time ago, before people's problems were quite as serious as they are now. So it was things like, I'm having a dispute with my neighbour.
But the episodes are there as a testament to happier times. Perhaps one day our children will listen back and be like, wow, things really were much easier in the year 2018 to 2019.
Yeah, and perhaps you yourself have a problem that needs to be solved. And maybe that problem is already dealt with via one of the podcasts. Perhaps you need to know what to do at a wedding where you don't know many people, or maybe you are feeling unlucky in love. These are just some of the crazy situations that we had to deal with. Somehow we managed to offer advice for them. Anyway, Joe,
there's something we don't mention ever, but we probably should, right? First, two things. One is you can email us on howtosurviveshow@gmail.com with your suggestions on how you'd survive in the various films we cover, your tips for films that we should cover, and any other fan-related things. We've had fan art, we've had poetry. Someone said they were going to get a tattoo related to the show once, which was both flattering and terrifying. But more importantly, we are able to take reviews, and people seem to have overlooked that fact for the last few months, on Apple Podcasts, I think it is called. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Apple app for the podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review. And we only accept 5-star reviews. In the past, maybe we were a little bit more lax about that, but the standard has improved so much in the last year by virtue of us just focusing on a very select number of films that it would be impossible to give us any less than a 5 star. It's a shame you can't give more than 5 stars.
We really are looking for only the very best of reviews. So please do consider whether or not you have to offer us before sitting down to write a review.
Yeah, and if you write a 5-star review and send it in to us, either on Twitter at How to Survive Pod or howtosurviveshow@gmail.com, and include your name, I will write and then read a limerick about you in the next episode. Even if it means 50 people get limericks, I'm going to do that. That's my promise. That's not so. I'm not buying reviews because I've had the advertising standards agency coming after me. I'd end up in court, and I don't want to get this podcast shut down. But I'll write you a limerick, and I don't think anyone would call that a true bribe.
No. Bribes, of course, feature heavily in this week's film, Spiral from the Book of Saw. More information about which is coming up after this.
This package just came in.
Get everybody out of here.
Play me.
Hello, Detective Banks. Do you know where your officers are?
Jigsaw?
Wait, I thought the Jigsaw Killer was dead.
He is.
Police detective Ezekiel Zeke Banks is sent to investigate the remains of a body found in a subway tunnel in the generic city that is never named in the Saw films. Zeke is the son of former police chief Marcus Banks, who oversaw a period of police brutality and corruption among the force, protecting the officers involved to help clean the streets more efficiently. Accompanying Banks on the case is a rookie detective named William Schenk.
So far, it is completely unlike any Saw film I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That's true.
That is true.
I'm not being glib at that point.
It does remind me of, is it Saw 7 or is it just 7?
It's just
It's
7,
one of those, yeah. The body is identified as one of Zeke's fellow detectives, Detective Boswick. He was placed in a trap that required him to rip his tongue out in order to survive, but was unable to escape. The case bears resemblance to the murders committed by the long-deceased Jigsaw killer, John Kramer. Another detective named Fitch is found murdered in a trap which required him to tear off his fingers to survive, but he was unable to escape. Some on the force believe Zeke may be involved due to a prior incident where Finch failed to back up Zeke during a shooting. Zeke suspects the involvement of his former partner Dunleavy, who was fired when Zeke exposed him for murdering a witness to police corruption. Notice that he did end up going to prison, I believe, as well, right?
Who? The Dunleavy?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe so. He's not clear how long he served, but you think shooting a witness might carry a fairly high tariff.
I mean, the forensic evidence on that has got to be pretty damning, hasn't it? Although he says it was in self-defense, which it wasn't. A box arrives at the station containing what appears to be a scrap of Detective Schenk's skin. Police find a skinned corpse, but that is revealed to be a particularly red herring. Zeke's father, Marcus, decides to investigate the case too and is abducted. Shortly thereafter, current police chief Garza is killed by a trap, which required her to sever her spinal cord in order to survive, but she was unable to do so and has hot wax poured over her face to the point of her death. While following up on a lead, Zeke is abducted. Zeke wakes up in a warehouse and, for the purposes of marketing and a shot they can use in a trailer, is chained to a pipe with a hacksaw in easy reach. However, also in easy reach is a bobby pin, which Zeke uses to pick the lock, soon after which discovering Dunleavy chained up. Dunleavy is killed by a trap, which requires Zeke to free him with a hidden key to survive, but he is unable to do so in time to save Dunleavy's life. Shortly thereafter, Zeke is confronted by the killer, who is none other than the only other named member of cast, Max Minghella as William Shank, aka William Emerson, Joe. Yeah. Emerson's father was the man murdered by Dunleavy, and Emerson vowed revenge over the police officers and institutions involved, believing Zeke to be an ally because he handed in Dunleavy to the authorities. He shows Zeke Marcus in a trap which will drain him of blood unless Zeke frees him by firing a bullet into a mechanism, meaning he can't use the bullet on Emerson. Just to be clear, Zeke only has one bullet and he has to choose whether to save his father or kill Emerson, his partner of all of maybe 3 days, who has betrayed him so coldly. What a intense and emotional moment that is.
Yeah, it's been what are 3 days though? What are 3 days?
Yes,
and he's been suspected to be dead for 1.5 days of those 3 days.
Absolutely, and there's one point where he pretends that he has a crying baby in the background by playing audio of a crying baby on his laptop, which is very stupid. Zeke frees his father and has a bit of a brawl with Emerson as SWAT officers arrive. Unseen by Zeke is a hidden mechanism that raises Marcus up, puppet-like, with a gun-like appendage pointed at the officers. The SWAT team shoots Marcus dead in response as Zeke looks on in horror, which allows Emerson the opportunity to escape.
Yep.
And that is how Spiral from the Book of Saw ends.
Yeah.
Joe?
Mm-hmm.
What did you make of Spiral from the Book of Saw?
So, in the words of John Kramer, I think, humanity is spiraling into disease and despair. That's not quite his words, I'm paraphrasing, but that's why it's called Spiral, right?
Right.
Because I think that's what...
Does he say that in one of the earlier films?
No, what's the chap's name? You just said it. Emerson,
yeah.
He says it. He says... It's all a spiral. John Kramer was right. It's all slipping into a spiral. It's just I don't know. My review there fell a little flat because I couldn't remember the quote. But rest assured, it's a pile of shit. Like about 15 years ago, right? If you told the world that there was a Saw film coming out starring Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson, I have a feeling that, regardless of its quality, it would have been a blockbuster on par with basically any film you can name. And just for some perspective, the top 10 highest grossing films of 2005, right? Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Star Wars Episode 3, The Chronicles of Narnia, War of the Worlds, King Kong, Madagascar, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Batman Begins, and Hitch. So both Samuel L. Jackson and Chris Rock appeared in top 10 highest grossing films.
Yeah.
Attack of the Clones, obviously, big. It was Revenge of the Sith that year. And that was a huge role for Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu.
Yes, of course.
The film couldn't have run without him. But in many ways, this is kind of my next question. First of all, the point I want to make is that it's a very 15 years ago decision to cast those two people as your lead in a film, I think. Maybe that's just because I live in the UK, maybe in America, and particularly in African American areas, maybe they have a much bigger draw, and I suspect that's probably the case. So I don't want to sound like I don't see the cultural impact the two people have had, but they are somewhat lacking in star power in 2021, in my opinion.
Okay.
Compared with the way they have been. Now, could it have been a gritty, hyper-realistic recasting of both actors, aka a la Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler, right? A complete reinvigoration of their career. I think maybe they both thought it would be. Certainly Chris Rock has tried to move away from type, would you say?
Well,
I don't recall him doing anything along these lines before.
Perhaps, yeah, but I mean, he is basically, for the first kind of half of the film at least, is playing Chris Rock, right?
Yeah, I think so. But in a detective film. So I'm not saying he succeeds in breaking time. I'm just saying that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, what we end up with is about 9 films rolled into one. And that's not an exaggeration, because I think I read on Wikipedia that they had 9 different stories. And then Chris Rock was like, "Hi, I've written a Saw film." And they were like, "Great, that rounds it off. Let's put them all together and see what we get." Most prominently, they've tried to remake a Saw film, but cast the police as victims, which is somewhat probably a little tone deaf given the past year's protests and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got Let's Remake 7, but it's going to be extremely boring and there's far too many characters to keep track of, and there's like no heart at the center of it, or no tension and no stakes. And then Let's Remake Bad Boys, but it's not remotely funny and there's no action.
Yeah. I mean, of course,
and the Bad Boys part for me in particular was when they blow the doors off the drug dealer's flat, and he's like, taking a selfie with his injured leg and taunting him with it.
Yeah.
It seems like a very Bad Boys sort of thing, but it's not funny. It's just like, this is shit.
Yeah. Of course, the counterpoint, I suppose, to your saying that the police are the victims is that most of these films operate on a kind of they gain the audience's permission to kill the characters in a brutal way by making them so unlikable. And I guess in 2020 or 2021 or whatever, making them police officers is perhaps a very easy, lazy shorthand of way of doing that. You could argue.
They are institutionally bad people. So
yeah. I mean, possibly. I don't know if that's
before this.
I mean, but you just have to look at all the rest of the Saw films, and like the victims are usually criminals. Corrupt police officers, pedophiles, abusers. Like they're generally malign individuals, obviously, which is like John Kramer's alleged whole thing, right? Of he wants to offer people a chance at redemption or whatever. I just on
your point, but then what you end up with, though, by virtue of having Samuel L. Jackson as your chief of police who's corrupt, is the suggestion that, like, the reason people consider police to be bad in 2021 is because of the institutional racism against black people, right?
Yeah,
that black people die in higher numbers than any other segment of society at the hands of police, and there's more people in prison that are black and all this stuff. So having Samuel L. Jackson as like a black person in charge, but he's murdering witnesses, is
he's the reason everything's so bad.
A little tone deaf.
Yeah, no, exactly, I think like I mean, I was kind of thinking of talking about this later, but I think now's the time to bring it up, given that we're talking about it. That I feel like there's an underlying idea there, right? That particularly given that the ending focuses on a black man being shot to death by police in error, or like a situation being manipulated for that to happen. But I don't feel like the film has kind of any interest or any like ability to tell, the kind of compelling version of that story or the interesting version of that story. And I think there's actually
that's been the case for all of them.
Yeah, well, yeah, but the other ones didn't. I mean, like, okay, so some of them had kind of like very gentle prods towards, maybe it's a critique of the American healthcare system or whatever. But I don't feel like this is as underbaked as that was, right? And I don't know. Yeah. So, but I think like, in the kind of frame of 2021, there's actually something I think borderline offensive in it, as you said. And I think it kind of wears all the trappings of a film that wants to address police corruption and race and all these issues, but makes absolutely no effort whatsoever to actually confront any of these issues. And so it's just like this kind of like slightly grotesque pastiche, like like you said, it's kind of a corrupt police. It's all very like clumsy and not very well executed, I think. And also I think the big issue when you're saying, oh, like, you know, if you went back to 2005 and made this, would it have been like a roaring success or whatever? Horror movies have moved on, like in those 15 years, considerably. Like you have this idea of elevated horror, and you know, imagine what, you know, someone like Jordan Peele could theoretically make of a film about police corruption and violence and a serial killer or whatever. I don't know, someone who has any interest in kind of actually addressing those stories. Candyman, the film that's coming out soon, is about, you know, they've kind of embedded like the story of a man being murdered by police into that film and made like the African American community, you know, a kind of central tenet of that film. And the whole
without even seeing it, you can immediately understand that Jordan Peele knows what he's doing when it comes to expressing that kind of race.
Yeah, and he's not the director. I think he's just like an executive producer or something. I don't think he's directing it himself. But it's, you know, like my point is that horror movies are now a space where people can tell those sorts of stories and they can address these sorts of issues. And to have the kind of like absolute surface level underbaked version of that, like I said, is kind of borderline offensive and slightly grotesque. And you know, I guess that's not really out of character though for the franchise.
No, I think probably not. I think there's lots in it that doesn't really make. Is the word verisimilitude? Is that where it's like verifiable by the rules of the world?
Yeah, like verisimilitude is like the extent to which something makes sense within the rules of the world that's been established, right? So like spaceships and lightsabers make sense in Star Wars, but they wouldn't make sense in Spiral.
Right, okay, yeah. They might improve it. Yeah, verisimilitude was not the word I was looking for then, sorry. But getting my buy-in or feeling believable then.
Right.
Having like Samuel L. Jackson rarely is believable in any role ever because he's just Samuel L. Jackson in everything. And he does the whole "I'm gonna get you motherfuckers" shouty, pulling the guns, and it's fun at times, but for 99% of the roles that he's in, it doesn't mean you're like, this is a believable person, this is a believable chief of police, or this is a believable oceanographer, or this is a believable detective, or a fucking US Marshal on a plane, whatever the fuck, right? You never really think this is how they behave. And I think the same goes for having the police chief as like a stunning babe. Like I'm not saying a stunning babe couldn't be police chief. I'm just saying that given the context of this film, and it's meant to be like a grimy, this is a man's world sort of thing, it just seems like it stretches my credulity to see a woman in that role. And I feel like she's only there so you can have a woman in the film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I kind of understand that. Yeah. Yeah. So, did you enjoy it, or?
It's just it's rubbish beyond any. Well, it's not beyond belief because you kind of expect it. That's the somewhat annoying thing.
Yes and no, right? Because I think so. To me, this all feels like a real missed opportunity. And I think it's obvious to compare Spiral with the original Saw and all of its sequels. But I think probably the most apt comparison is, you know, to the most recent Saw film, which is Jigsaw. Like, which one was a more successful kind of restarting of the franchise? Because Jigsaw was kind of also a reboot and also the only other kind of like modern Saw film.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the last few years, basically. And in my opinion, I think Jigsaw is a far better film and a much better, like more faithful entry to the franchise, right? And we're pretty well documented in our overall dislike of the Saw franchise. But I feel like if you're going to make a Saw film, you kind of need certain ingredients, right? You need the kind of ingenious or like creative traps. You need the gross out gore. you need like the twisty turny plot, and that doesn't necessarily have to be specific to, you know, oh, John Kramer's like dentist's, you know, fucking parking assistant is, you know, left a, you know, drawing pin in the parking lot and now John Kramer wants to kill him or whatever. Right. It's like, it's like, you know, in Jigsaw, the kind of twist to that was somewhat interesting. Like in some of the Saw films, they kind of undermine what what your expectations are for the kind of interrelationships of the characters and things like that.
Yeah, to an appalling level.
Oh like no, but I'm not talking about the kind of wider mythology. I'm talking about like within certain Saw films, there are kind of like twists to like. There's one Saw film where a guy is going through a series of traps. I think it's Saw 6. I think that is the most like overt healthcare one, and he's like an insurance loss adjuster or whatever.
And he has to choose who's going to live and die.
Right, there's that. But then the whole time you're convinced that he's trying to get through these traps to rescue his family who are also trapped. But then the reveal at the end is that the family are actually the family of a man whose insurance claim he denied. And then at the end, they have the choice whether to kill him or not, or to forgive him. So like that is a kind of like, oh, you know, I get it. Like I understand, you know, that's an interesting twist, right? Certainly within the context of the Saw films, that's an interesting twist.
It's about as interesting as it's going to get.
Yeah. So, but there's nothing even approaching that in Spiral. Spiral has some of the most bland traps, I think, from the franchise. I think with the exception of the Samuel L. Jackson puppet trap and like the payoff for that, none of them would get anywhere near like a top 10, top 20 list of the most memorable or like, you know, fan favorites or whatever.
They're almost memorable because they're so rubbish. Like, so what struck me about these traps, I feel like a fucking, like, this is the most like internet podcast guy talking about Saw traps that I've ever felt, right? But do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But they are particularly rubbish in this film because first of all, you don't understand. Like, I couldn't understand anyway how the trap would stop when they succeed in doing whatever they have to do.
Yeah,
like the guy who has to pull off his own tongue, he then has to run out of the way of a train anyway. Then you've got the guy who has to pull off his own fingers. It's not quite clear how pulling off his fingers would stop the water rising because you don't see like.
It's just Jigsaw magic, isn't it? Like, you know.
Yeah, so you have to trust this crazy person who's trying to kill you is not going to try and kill you. And then the severed neck one also doesn't make sense because it's like, well, how? Like when it's like you have to cut off an amount of your flesh and put it on the scales, and that will visibly
stop the
release. Yeah, exactly. Or like cut off your own foot.
Go
back to basics. Cut off your own foot and escape. Yeah. That is the question.
Right. Yeah.
If like, at the heart of Saw is this amazing like, would you be able to cut off your own foot in order to survive? Right.
Yeah.
That is day one Saw, and everything that's been added since then has made it infuriating and confusing, but never more than in Spiral, where the traps are just like ridiculously boring.
Yeah, gone from would you cut off your own foot to survive to would you solve a riddle to find a key in a bin to save a man you don't like from being pelted with broken glass by a jet engine.
I mean, it's the sort of thing that keeps you up at night, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pondering that sort of thing. The big philosophical questions in life.
It's the trolley problem for the modern age, isn't it?
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah. So that kind of it fails that test. You know, certainly in my opinion, it also has very little, like a kind of bafflingly little gore, I thought, and you know, like a very unimaginative plot. Jigsaw, I think, on the other hand, is kind of at least a little bit of a mystery because you have the bodies turning up around the city, and then you have like the ongoing like barn house traps.
Yeah, they're trying to get to it before it's too late, right?
But then it turns out that that's all from like
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's, and it's like a recreation, right? The recreation stuff is quite hokey, and Logan is hokey, and his whole like I speak for the dead thing is a load of, we're well documented in our kind of thinking all that is nonsense. But at least like that, again, like there's the little kind of mini twist, right? The gore is, there's a lot of gore in Jigsaw. Like the guy who gets fed into like ironically like a spiral shaped blade and gets like cut into ribbons is pretty horrific. This guy gets his leg cut off as well by like wires, which is pretty great.
That's in Jigsaw.
And then in Jigsaw, yeah, like there's enough of that like toe curling stuff. Whereas in this, there was just none of that. I was kind of baffled by it.
The fingers getting pulled off was a bit gnarly.
That was the closest it got, yeah. But then it is just like, I don't know.
I did read that there was a trap they had to cut out because it went too far. And I'm just, I can't understand what, given the oeuvre that we've had to put up with, what could be a bridge too far.
Yeah. Where they're like, that's poor taste, guys. Come on.
But then amazingly, they must have been able to edit around that.
Yeah.
And you've lost an entire death of a character and trap and and they just like they're fine, don't they?
Like, despite the fact that all this like Spiral was developed as a Saw continuation or a reboot or whatever you want to talk about, I feel like without all of these kind of like key characteristics, it's just like a very generic, quite boring serial killer film that doesn't really offer anything.
It's got far more in common with Seven than it has with Saw.
Yeah, why does he use the traps at all?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
like I want to talk about this later in a certain section, but yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me, really. And like I know you want to talk about like what would you do if, because so well and good us sitting here on our high horses, Joe.
Yeah.
But in Jigsaw, they had like I remember saying this at the time because I thought this is where they should have gone with it anyway, right? In Jigsaw, one of the characters is like a member of like an online cult, which is like, oh, actually, Jigsaw was right, and blah, 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 right? And the idea that Jigsaw isn't like one man anymore, he's like a movement.
An idea, yeah.
Right. That's interesting. That's like a Joker Batman thing, right?
Yeah. You can kill the man, but you can't kill the idea.
Right. And in 2021, fucking QAnon and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, that would 100% be like a very kind of apt modern interpretation of that story, I think.
Yeah.
And they laid the groundwork for it in Jigsaw, and then they've just gone, oh, actually Chris Rock wants to make a fucking Saw film. Like, it's bizarre.
Can you qualify that? Just I mean, we have the background or some background knowledge for the production of this film,
right?
But listeners to this podcast might be less au fait with it. So,
okay, so as far as I'm aware, the story goes that Chris Rock went to a wedding and he was sat next to someone from Lionsgate, and I don't know, Lionsgate man was like, oh, I've got to, my job this month is trying to figure out what the hell we're going to do with Saw or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. I might be slightly colouring in. But Chris Rock was basically like, yeah, I'll have a fucking go at making a Saw film. How hard could it be? Or whatever. Yeah. And then here we go, Spiral arrived.
He's got, I think, a writing credit. And as I understand it, he wrote a proof, not a script, but like an outline. Yeah, treatment. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which was then interspersed with the 9 other ideas they were also toying with.
Yeah.
Which is an astonishing number of films or options to toy with and merge into one. In any case, but it reeks of like, what a studio might do under these circumstances. But it's fucking, it's abominable. It's all over the place. There's the tone. It's like, I wouldn't say the tone is, up and down because it's bereft of tone. It's just bland. It is the blandest, dullest film we've covered in some time.
Yeah.
But here's what I would do, right? Since you asked, I would love for a completely like lo-fi version of Saw, where you've got, rather than these like gigantic like industrial machinery, like how did they build this without any fucking engineering degrees, or like access to all the equipment and a lathe and like so forget that part, right? It's just a crazy person in a kind of Joker or Saint Maud kind of way, where they're just like a disenfranchised, maybe Daniel Blake, right? A disenfranchised person who's pushed their limits.
Yeah.
Admittedly, Daniel Blake did not end in anyone killing people.
No.
Joker and Saint Maud both did. Spoilers for those films. But that would be great, I think. Someone who's just gone beyond it and then starts carrying out their own kind of experiments with these homemade traps made with identifiable household objects. So there's this kind of like believability to it all.
Exactly. You need that like anyone could chain someone to a pipe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then shoot it on handheld cameras in just the house and don't worry about the fucking all this shit, zooming
do you want to
in,
just
panning,
explain?
shaking.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Could you just clarify what you mean by those noises?
Yeah. Well, anytime there's a Saw trap shown, it doesn't just show you the trap and be like, oh, it's a chair with some straps, and if you go in it, it's gonna pull out your fingernails, whatever. It's like it zooms in hard while the camera's like shaking, and there's these screeching like noises, and it's like, and it's all industrial sounding, and it reminds me of 13 and Ghosts.
Yeah.
Every time.
New metal cinema at its finest.
Yeah, exactly. Like, new metal hasn't been a thing for, let's say, 15 years. To keep that theme going. But it's still used in this film gratuitously.
Mm-hmm.
I'd drop that and just have it as just like, a nice up close.
This sounds worryingly like this sounds worryingly less like a treatment for a Saw film and more like something that you're planning to do yourself in real life.
In real, not make the film, but like, I'm gonna carry it out. Yeah.
What I would do is just tie people to chairs, film it with handheld cameras, only use household objects.
But I think there's more fun in that, or fun maybe isn't the word, but there's more. But I think fun is the word. You go to a horror movie to have fun, right? You're not really going there to have your like this shit literally scared out of you. Or maybe you are, but that's fun. So I'm kind of rambling, but you get my point, right? I'm not going there to be bored to tears, let's put it that way, or to be made jump every 5 seconds by a screeching guitar because some other new piece of metal furniture is being shown.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've solved I'd say that actually. I'm sorry to let you know that Saw X is in development as we speak, as is a Spiral TV show.
What?
Yes.
Starring Chris Rock?
No, I don't. Well,
really?
I doubt it. There is a Spiral TV. This is according to Wikipedia, so but it's like development has begun, sort of thing. And it might be one of these things that never comes out, but who knows, mate?
So.
You hope
I just one final thought is we were texting before we watched this film, or in fact we were in person talking about it, and I said what I kind of hope is that it is as shit as the others, because at this point I'm signed up for lean into it, right? I want the abnormally irritating twist at the end. Like, the fun of watching a Saw film for me is not necessarily the traps. It's that, like, 4.5 minutes at the end where that music starts rising, and you're like, "Oh, shut up!" And you know what's going to happen, and they're going to press a recorder, and it's going to be John Kramer going, "Oh, it was me. All your life, you've wanted to get away from John Kramer. You know, I'm not." Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted. And I love getting angry about how shit and insulting it is that they do that every time. So not to have it this time felt like it was missing something.
Yeah.
And it's like
you felt the absence.
Be careful what you wish for, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah. The grass is always greener on the other side.
Maybe the answer is that we don't want gritty, sensible, well thought through reboots of these franchises. We just want them to lean into how absurdly stupid and shit they are.
Exactly.
Well,
more of the same, please.
More of the same, exactly. Well, with all that said, Joe, there's only one question that remains. How would you survive Spiral?
So tip here is for Samuel L. Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Neglected to write down his character's name.
Marcus.
Chief Marcus. He gets kidnapped, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does, yeah.
Yeah. And that's when he goes single-handedly to an undisclosed location.
Mm-hmm. He thinks he's meeting... Doesn't he think he's meeting Zeke? True. But, I mean...
Yeah, he does, because
if I was him...
stole his phone and was like...
Yeah. But if I was him, when I turned up to meet... Like, if you were like, oh, do you want to meet me down,
the abandoned soap factory?
Well, no, yeah, or just down the shops or whatever, wherever, somewhere that we would meet, the tally. And I get to the tally and there's a big Spiral graffitied on the wall and like on all the doors, and like all the lights are off and no one else is there. I'd be like, right, I think this might be related to the series of Spiral related murders that have been going on recently. So I'm going to call. I'm going to double check that Ezekiel.
All these people I used to work with and hired to kill witnesses innocent on my behalf seem to be dying.
Yeah, it's weird.
And it seems to be building up in their proximity to me. In terms of the authority and responsibility they had for the crimes committed during that period.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go alone to a place that I've never been before and hope for the best.
Wouldn't happen to Steve Arnott, would it, mate?
No. He'd say, I need some uniforms, and he'd take them with him.
Yeah. I need an armed response unit over to the abandoned soap factory.
Yeah. Come on, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
That's
I agree.
That's quite a good impression, by the way.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I agree. It's nonsense. But I mean, I guess it's one of the lesser nonsensical crimes for me as the film goes. One thing that I know that you would have seen it as well because we were remarking on it via the instant messenger that we were using when watching the film at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And
you say WhatsApp. I don't think we're under any legal obligation not to mention WhatsApp.
Fucking hell, mate! What if we're going to get sponsored by Telegram this episode and they listen to it? It's the bit where a box arrives. This is already at the point where they know that there's a serial killer out there killing police officers. And a box arrives at the police station from like a random courier. It's very doesn't that happen in 7 as well? I don't know, something like that.
Well, the big payoff in 7 is
yes. No, I'm confusing that when he himself turns up at the police station. But yeah, basically,
such a good. Should we watch 7? It's so good.
We should. The chief of police basically says they're like, oh, we shouldn't open it. Wait for the bomb squad or whatever. And the chief of police says, we've got 2 dead cops. There's no time.
Yeah.
Now, a very quick way to kill lots of cops in a very short amount of time, as quickly as possible, you might say, is by opening a bomb in a police station, I would wager. And this seems reckless beyond belief. And it's in the way that you're talking about that kind of verisimilitude thing, right? It's reckless in a way that suggests this character has no right to be the chief of police. Do you know what I mean? It's not exactly. Like it's not like, oh, she's, you know, I don't know. It feels like the actions of like Chris Rock's character might do it because he's like desperate.
He's panicking. Yeah.
Right. Whereas it's her responsibility. Like it's gonna look bad. It's gonna reflect poorly on her if the police station is demolished by a bomb that she insisted on opening.
She's not gonna. I mean, maybe she knows the game's up for her. Maybe she went downstairs earlier, saw a big stretcher with a big wax bucket over it, and was like, "Ooh,
that's got my name on it."
Yeah, I better choose a quick option instead. Open the bomb.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it was wishful thinking in that respect. Yeah, that seems reckless, and even more reckless given that it's coming from a person in a position of authority.
So, how to survive?
Just
tip:
don't wait for the bomb. Get the bomb squad to do what they're literally employed to do.
Yeah, but there's no time. Two cops are dead. No time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
they might get more dead.
15. There's another package rise. 17 police have been vaporized. There's no time. Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it?
Any other ideas from you?
Well, this is a little bit Steve Arnott again, really. Steve Arnott, for anyone who doesn't know, main character of Line of Duty, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Line of Duty is a show about catching
police officers,
coppers, and everything.
They care about one thing, Joe.
Yeah, what's that?
It's catching bent coppers, isn't it? They care about one thing,
and they follow the law to the letter. Now, Chris Rock, I would say, does not follow the law to the letter.
No,
because he sends a paintball grenade in a bucket.
Yeah.
Up to a drug dealer's apartment.
Yeah.
It goes off in the drug dealer's face, effectively could have taken both his eyes out, which seems to me overstepping the rights of a police officer to blind not even a suspect, someone who's a witness to a crime, I think, at that point, isn't he?
Yeah.
What do they want out of him?
He's an informant, basically, isn't it? He wants to know where his old partner's gone, I think.
Right, so he's a witness. So he attempts to blind a witness, kicks the door in, shoots him in the leg, and then starts mocking the injured suspect witness by taking photos with the leg. Not much dignity in that. And no medical assistance is sought for the unconscious woman on the couch, having just fired blindly into the room. She could have been wounded. So there you go. I think generally that is a bad thing to do for a policeman. And if I was the drug dealer, I would be pressing charges.
What is it in Line of Duty? A Rec 15 or something?
Rec 15, yeah, I think so. Yellow notice.
Yellow notice, yeah. I think that he'd be put on red notice, surely. I mean, the problem is as well, in a kind of, again, like whether or not the film makes any sense kind of question, is that he's clearly supposed to be the like one good police officer, right? He's the one who turned in his corrupt.
Yeah, it puts the light to that, doesn't it?
Right, exactly. But that's my point, is that it doesn't make sense with, you know, with anything that you're supposed to believe about that character, which makes it kind of doubly frustrating. Yeah.
I would have taken he does everything by the book approach and is driven mad. If he's doing that in the final scene, because in a kind of like Joker versus Batman kind of way,
right,
that is far more compelling. Because he gets to that point where he loses his mind. Because his like father gets shot in front of him and stuff. That's like should be the violent climax in Chris Rock's world. But instead it's like, oh no, he's already like fucking everyone up.
It just doesn't It's bizarre, isn't it? And yeah, like you say, it's not just like wounding the guy because he like smashes his leg, he breaks his leg badly, and then is taking selfies with it and all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't make sense with what we've been told about the character. Yeah. So what would you have done?
Knocked the door. Maybe arrested him on suspicion of involvement in a crime.
Yeah. There's no time, Joe. There's 2 dead cops. There's no time.
2 police officers are dead. Yeah, exactly. Arrest him on suspicion of drug dealing because you've now got him selling drugs.
Yeah.
And then offer him a bargain, information on the whereabouts of this, not even another suspect, just a guy that you want to talk to, another witness. Fucking crazy.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense. My final point is a tip for Emerson himself. Just don't bother with the traps. Just murder the police officers.
Shoot him in the head.
Well, it doesn't make any. Like I said, this is where it becomes like a kind of, they had a film. It's like they had a script for a film where a serial killer is killing police officers, and they've just crowbarred in, the fucking bottle bank jet engine scene and the, Chinese finger trap, whatever electrocution bath scene and like all that kind of stuff, subway tongue scene. Like, what possible motivation is there for him to make those traps, right? Because with John Kramer, at least it was that he was an engineer and an inventor, right? That makes sense. You see him building that horrible fucking puppet and his wife has to pretend that it's like a wonderful gift. Oh, a child will love that.
Yeah.
Like that all kind of makes sense, right? And his apparent motivation, twisted though it was, is reforming people, right? Which again makes sense. You put them in a situation where they have to escape. They have a newfound love of life or whatever. That isn't the case with Emerson. He specifically wants these people dead, and he's not interested in like reforming them. He says himself at the end that it's not about reform. Like they need to like kill all of the corrupt police officers, and that's why he wants to work with Zeke, so that Zeke can like go, yeah, this guy's Ben, let's murder him. And so it doesn't make any sense with his motivations, and we don't see at any point that he would have any kind of such a skill set, right? It just makes no. I would have even accepted, like in the scene where Chris Rock sees him hiding in the cupboard or whatever, there's like a Meccano set in there with him or something.
Yeah, exactly. Same with Connects.
Yeah, but there's nothing like that, and it's just he's a young man as well, which makes it stretch credulity even further. Because at least if you really dug into it, like John Kramer, he like rented out the building where he did loads of his traps and built everything. Like he was involved in like housing products.
Exactly.
So, and his wife was a doctor. So theoretically he'd know how to sedate people, maybe. I don't know. And, like I said, he was an inventor.
There's verisimilitude, right?
Right, exactly. Whereas with this, it's literally like he's like a 30-year-old guy. He's like our age. And he is apparently like dedicated his life to becoming a police detective so that he can, like 3 days in, murder 6 police officers, right? Just don't bother with that. Just murder the police and like you're probably a lot harder to catch when you're not leaving all these like fucking sprinkles of clues everywhere as well.
Yeah. He is mad, isn't he? Surely any serial killer who's doing anything as ostentatious as that wants to be caught.
But again,
or wants the attention at least.
But he's not like Ed Gein. Like he's not like making lampshades out of people's skin and things like that. He's like he's building like complex contraptions. Again, it doesn't like if you're trying to tell me that he's completely insane, I just don't buy it, because insane people can't like build complex machinery. It's so complex we don't even know how it works. Like it's
exactly.
so complex.
Well, there's a nice little poetic comparison to end on here, which is that the machines themselves, it all traps in this film, in fact, are, I think, stylish in their appearance, nonsensical in their operation, and ineffectual in their ability to invoke terror in the people watching. All of which apply to the film itself.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a shame. It's a missed opportunity as far as I'm concerned, and I'm disappointed. Must try harder.
Okay. Speaking of trying harder, what do we got next on this pod?
Well, let's hope Karl Freund has a little more to offer with his 1932 classic, The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff. Available to rent digitally wherever you rent things digitally. Can The Mummy from 1932, which everyone agrees is a classic of early horror cinema, possibly live up to Spiral from the Book of Saw by Darrell Lynn Bousman? Who could possibly say?
This is our first foray into a Universal Monsters movie.
Yes.
Should we give some background on why we're doing that?
Yeah, so we're going to do a first for the podcast, which is we're going to watch The Mummy, and then The Mummy. And that's The Mummy from 1932, The Mummy from 1999, I think it is. And
Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, and The Mummy from 2017 or whenever it was that kick-started the Dark Pictures anthology that we all know and love.
Yeah, grand opening, grand closing.
Yeah. So
it's
if you
want
to,
rock line, mate, just for some more poetry
from Spiral,
poetry. from Bigger and Blacker, I think, when he's talking about.
I see, right.
I can't remember what the joke is. Just there's grand opening, grand closing.
Great, good. I'm so glad you derailed me when I was.
Wait, go back. Let's go back. Come on.
Listen, The Mummy 1932, The Mummy 1999, The Mummy 2016-17, whenever that was, starring Tom Cruise.
Starring and definitely not directed by Tom Cruise.
Yes, absolutely not. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a few weeks' time. So if you want to join us for that, then The Mummy is all you got to remember for the next 3 episodes. I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun to see how the same basic idea is reinterpreted by different people, because we've been doing it 242 times in a row, and I'm interested to see how other people are handling it. So there we go.
Yeah.
Look forward to that. Thank you very much for joining me, Joe. It's been a wild ride down the spiral. Any final thoughts?
Just I'm looking.
Do you know what I've just realised? Right, there's no closing line from the film, is there?
Well,
there's no game over. There's no I Speak for the Dead. So
what is it?
What he does is Chris Rock looks over as the lift is closing and goes, "No!" And Emerson just puts his hand his finger to his lips.
Oh,
which I don't know what that means.
It's because Chris Rock did it when he saw him in the, when
in the wardrobe. Yeah.
Yeah, when Mulaney or whatever he is had killed Emerson's father.
Right. Do you know what? That's quite good.
Is it? Because he just killed his father.
Well, no, I just mean it's that I give him credit. I'd forgotten about that, but it's a nice little repeated gag. Is it? Who knows? See you later.
Hey, Chris, I want my mummy. How about that? How about that, Friday? Because it's the Mummy next week.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Look forward to that for the next 3 weeks.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Got my Switch. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You've got your privacy blur effect on your Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I presume that's because you're doing
behind me.
Yeah, exactly. But you just held up like a blurry oblong.
Let me
made it look like it is like you're holding up a dildo or something on TV. They have to blow it out.
Is that better?
Yes.
Now you can see it. It's not one of these TV switches, so it's not really a switch. It's more of just a single, I don't know, non-switch. A stick with what you've got, and don't change anything.
No options.
No, you can apparently put it through a TV using a USB-C to HDMI lead. And I have got one, but who can? I mean, I've got a handheld device. Why do I then want to put it through a TV? If I wanted that, I'd just get a TV device.
I don't think you can do it. I'm not sure that you can.
You'd know. You'd know.
I might be wrong, but yeah, no, it doesn't have the internal hardware to do it. So there might be a way of you buying some other nonsense.
I don't want that. I mean, like I said, I want a portable device, not a.
Exactly. Yeah, I got
a PlayStation, and I don't play that, so I think I'm gonna get one game and play it, and then I'm gonna give the Switch back because it's not mine.
Right.
And do you know what that one game's gonna be?
Go on.
You'll laugh. Dark Souls.
Nice. Good choice. Very good choice. Are you gonna pussy out again when you attack someone?
No, I don't know the mate's name. You probably know his name. You probably first name terms with him by now.
Which one?
Relic Knight, or whatever he's called, sat by the fire.
Crestfallen Warrior?
Yeah.
Yeah, mate.
Yeah. Crestfallen Warrior. Don't provoke his ire, is my advice.
No. Yeah, that is good advice.
He may be crestfallen, but is he pretty OP compared to how you are when you start?
I mean, I don't know really. I've never tried to attack him. So
I don't think I tried to attack him. I think I tried to sneak past him or tested out the buttons next to him.
He's literally just sitting there, and if you talk to him, he's like, "Oh, hiya, how you doing?"
And here's what you should. Oh, yes, I tried to do my best.
No, it's just that in all Dark Souls games, it's just you need the sound of a crackling fire, and then you need oh, another one, is it?
Yeah.
Well, I can't say I'm surprised or whatever.
I like in Bloodborne when they're like, "No, go away. You're not welcome here." Stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good.
Well,
I look forward to
on the DS or Switch. I'd play that, but unfortunately, I've got to get another game that I already own. A different format. I don't know. I feel like if I've had it on PlayStation 3, but I feel like if I get it on the Switch, then it's like going into casino with fresh odds. Do you know what I mean? I lost, I left, went for a burger, I come back, fresh odds.
The question is, do you have the stamina to not just give up the moment that it becomes even slightly difficult?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. The thing that pisses me off, I'm a busy man, as you know, and the loading screens sort of do my nut. So have they got over that problem yet?
Well, there are still loading screens,
Well,
yes.
I don't know about that then. I have to rethink this entire venture.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to tell you about this movie I watched.
Yeah?
It's called Spiral. No, not really. It's called The Amusement Park. Have you heard of it?
Only because you told me about it.
Okay, so I've got Shudder, the Amazon movie channel, and kind of by accident, I think I signed up for the free trial while we watched something once, and it's never unsigned it. Which is
so you're keeping the lights on at Shudder HQ, basically.
Yeah, I think so, but I don't mind it because they do have some pretty decent horror films on there, and I like horror films, so why not? And it came up. The poster looks amazing. It's this old man whose head is being like an exploded diagram, but inside is a fun fair. And I was like, that sounds great. Like it sounds like this weird psychedelic trip or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I see it. I can see it. Oh, so this is from 2019. I thought. Oh no, wait.
It's
I
not.
see.
It's not.
Right.
So I was under that impression as well, and I started watching it, and it opens on the main character, or the actor who plays the main character, walking down an empty like boulevard by the beach, talking to camera, and he's like, "The events you're about to see are meant to represent the experiences of people like me, elderly people," and he's like, "You know, we are the downtrodden of society, and it's very hard to cope. People don't take you seriously, and there's invisible difficulties in being an old person. And the people who play the other old people in the film alongside me were all volunteers from institutions around New York. And this is the most fun they've had in years making this film because their lives are full of they're meaningless essentially. And so you're like, oh, that sounds interesting. But then you remember it's a George A. Romero film, and like every one of these like metaphors for how old people are treated in this horror film is like so on the nose that it's basically just like it's happening. And so the story is it opens on this old man who's been like shit kicked out of him, and like a clean and like fine version of himself is about to leave this like white room they're in. He's like, no, don't go out there. He's like, won't you come with me? He's like, no, it's not safe out there. No, people, you don't go out there, please. It's no good, or whatever. He's like, I'm gonna go out there and see what's like. And he goes out there, and it's this amusement park, and the rides and attractions are just like contrivances to make old people have a bad time. So the bumper cars, for example, it's a pretty funny scene where this old lady, before they go on, they have to have an eye test, and this man is deemed not to be fit to be a driver. So he's like, the guy's like, you're a passenger now forever. So they get in the bumper car, they drive into the back of someone who gets out and starts shouting at them because they're old. And the police show up and refuse to take any of the elderly witnesses seriously. The freak show is just old people in their like bathing costumes, or like an old man in a wheelchair or whatever. And then weirdly, like the Grim Reapers just appears at various times, just staring at him. Then at one point, the Hell's Angels show up. The park is otherwise empty. The Hell's Angels just show up and beat the shit out of him. So he goes to the doctor. The doctor's like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about that. Just to put a plaster on it, or whatever." And anyway, I was like, it's only about 50 minutes long, and it's just scene after scene of these like weird contrived. Like I see what you're trying to say there, George. And it was a bit shit, I'll be honest. But it's nice because it's like George A. Romero. And I decided, how has this come out in 2019? So I looked into it, and there's a nice write up on Roger Ebert's website. Who, not by Roger Ebert because he's dead, but it turns out this was the Lutheran church in, I think it was Chicago where George A. Romero lived. Basically hired him to make a film promoting the difficulties that old people face. So he made this like basically horror film where it's just like turns their lives into a living hell. And the Lutheran church were like, yeah, we're not going to use this. So it wasn't even seen like, it wasn't brought out ever until it was found in like one of George A. Romero's like back catalogs when they were clearing out his offices and stuff. And it was released at a film festival and is now